everybody, welcome back to Shutter Magazine. I'm Dustin Lucas, and today I want to talk to you about the quality versus the quantity difference between processing your RAWs. And the first thing I want to start out with is making that distinction between converting your RAW files and processing your RAW files. I enjoy software where I can do the importing, the editing, and the exporting out of it. Programs such as Capture One Pro, DxO Optics Pro, which is more of a workflow for fixing adjustments and a little more automated on the adjustment level, but also Lightroom Creative Cloud. And I want to compare and contrast these three programs on the level of quality, on how they're rendering the RAWs, how well they're doing with the dynamic range, as well as the sharpness from camera, and how much of the sharpness I'm losing, the lens fall off of the sharpness. So those are the things I want to look at, and then sort of wrap up with overall quantity and workflow. I know I've talked a lot about Lightroom Creative Cloud, but let's dive in and just sort of look at the images, and you can see the differences yourself. So I have them kind of broke down here by Capture One, Optics Pro, and then Lightroom Creative Cloud. And I want to start out by looking at the Capture One image. And as you can see, I shot this image, I underexposed it a bit just to see the dynamic range of what my camera, how it could record the RAWs, as well as the dynamic range of bringing that up in all three programs. And I thought that would be perfect for that to show sort of the noise that it's going to start to introduce, as well as how it's going to start dealing with these shadows and these underexposed areas in the leaves of this image. And I know shooting a blue dress on a green background, a little bit of red graffiti, definitely not a typical shoot, but I kind of wanted to show those difficult colors to have, sort of contrasting in the background with the green and the blue. So I'm going to start out by lifting the exposure about 1.5 stops on this image, and just taking it to there. It's a little bright, but I'm going to leave it at 1.5 stops there. And what you'll notice is I turned off the sharpening, because a lot of times these programs, they're going to do a little bit of enhancing on a default level. So I made sure to turn the sharpening off. I made sure to turn the noise reduction off. The other thing, my camera profile, which, let's see here. Camera profile is going to be native to the image sensor itself. The only time that's really a problem is with Lightroom, is it'll default to Adobe standard. But I'll show you that in a second. Let's go to Optics Pro. And I'm going to go to the Customize menu, and you see I have everything turned off here. I'm going to drop down Exposure Compensation, which if I turn that feature on, it still hasn't done anything, the corrected preview. So I'm going to go ahead and bump that up 1.5 stops as well. And these are going to be relatively close, as you can see, between the Optics Pro version here as well as the Capture One version. And I got rid of my sidebar. I guess I can put that up since it's anyway. So the last thing I want to open up, I have this image open in Lightroom, and I want to show you that I have sharpening at 0, noise reduction at 0 on both the color and the luminance. I know color defaults to 25 and the sharpening defaults to 25. I made sure to turn those off, but you see how dull it is on this images, and that's basically because of the profile. So in order to give Lightroom a run for its money, I'm going to put it in camera, probably camera standard. Would probably be the closest one. And I'm of course going to lift the exposure 1.5 stops. And you can kind of see how it's treating the white balance. The white balance is left. And this is kind of an odd thing too. Whenever you're bringing in the images directly into Lightroom or Capture One, those two programs specifically, the Kelvin temperature is a little bit different. This one's shot at 5950 at a +10 tint. Bringing it into Capture One, the increments I think are set up a little bit different. If I put this at that same 5950, 5950, sort of gets the images pretty close, but not exact. I'm going to put the tint at 10, but the tint really goes, tint adjustment is definitely not even close. I'm going to go ahead and just put this back to its default. of rendering it in as shots. The only thing that I've lifted is the exposure in both of those. Optics Pro I have as well, so that's the only adjustment that I've done. And they're going to be using the native processors for Optics Pro as well as the Capture One, native to the image sensor. And then as well as you have the Lightroom and choosing the camera standard. Now the other programs have their own versions of these profiles and they're applying them, and so just to give all three programs the same information so we're not jumping over anything. So first what I want to do is kind of zoom in here and kind of see how it's reacting to lifting these shadows, how the grain is working out, and those types of things. Let's see here. I'm going to keep the image right about there. And I'm going to jump over to Optics Pro. Let's see here. Let's zoom in to 100%. Maybe not that far. I'll go to 75. Go to about there. We'll go to Lightroom. We'll do the same thing. I might as well just go 100%. See here, 100%. So starting out with the Capture One and where this sharpening is, what this image looks like. So you're looking at, we got a little bit of noise here. We're seeing the strands of hair brought up quite nice. This image overall, it doesn't have any adjustments, just the exposure lifted. But something to take into account is all these leaves around. And this image is shot at 5.6, so it's going to have, it's going to be pretty optically sharp as a whole, but just kind of looking at this image zoomed in without any processing, kind of looking at the hair and looking at the ivy behind. Let's go to the Optics Pro. As you can see how it's kind of taken the hair. The hair is still kind of dark. It's processing this image a little bit differently. This is a sort of autocorrect and a fine-tuning program, so it's going to have a lot of features on it. They're going to be a little bit different than Capture One and Lightroom. Those are two kind of more raw, purely processing software. So in looking at this image, zoomed in, the colors look good. It looks like it has sharpening on it, but I made sure to turn that off. But it looks like they sort of enhanced this image a little bit versus the Capture One. This kind of has, it's a little bit of a soft. It has a little bit of lens fall off to be corrected. Definitely more contrast in this image than the Capture One. You can see in the leaves here and in the shadows, you're seeing how much, like, sort of the distinction between these slight highlights to mostly midtones and then into these shadows and black tones. In the Capture One, it's giving you a little more information in those shadows. I'm going to pull this up here. As you can see in this sort of here, how it's going into the shadow there versus Capture One. It has a little more information. It seems a little bit smoother, less noise for sure. Let's go into the Lightroom version and kind of see our compare and contrast between the Capture One, because those are the two big programs. A lot of people talk about Capture One and its amazing ability to render out RAWs and how sharp they are and the quality, but we'll get into workflow and how well it works with multiple images a little bit later. But I'm kind of looking into the shadows of Lightroom, looking at the noise and how well it opened up these shadows. When we jump back to Capture One, pretty close between these two. Lightroom, a little bit more noisy. It seems that the Capture One, it's a little bit softer. I don't know if it's dealing with the noise automatically or kind of it's doing a color noise softening. Our hair definitely does seem softer. And I have the sharpening and everything turned off. I'll make sure that I'm sure that's all turned off. There we go. So in looking there, this image definitely it's definitely sharper. That's, you know, you can't. Wondering. Might have turned this down to 180. This must be the default setting for the sharpening, because these are pretty equal now. Um, that makes sense for the for how it's rendering the raw. I apologize. I turned that completely off, and I think it lost. It got quite soft, and it was kind of odd to me that Lightroom was processing it without any sharpening, and it was sharper. That wouldn't make any sense. So um, let's go back to. Oh, let me zoom out here. Going back to the comparison of these shadows and, you know, how it's dealing with the hair and the shadows and the specific strands of the hair. Going back to Lightroom, seems pretty sharp. It definitely has some color noise, what's going on. So if I turn that color noise to default, it's going to soften that and kind of get rid of that look altogether. But you can kind of see in the shadows how it's dealing with that. It seems less clear, it's less sharp, it's definitely noisier. This is sharper and less noisier. I have noise reduction turned off. The sharpness is as it's supposed to be. And so just looking at the quality of how it's rendering these this same file is really interesting. Between Capture One, Optics Pro here, and you can see it's Optics Pro is kind of struggling with bringing that up. It seems like it's just adding a lot of unneeded contrast at the moment. And if I turn this off, of course, I'm going to get back to my default underexposed image. But it's just the exposure compensation. This feature here is just kind of adding contrast. So it's really hard to compare this directly to Lightroom and Capture One. But as you can see, the difference between Lightroom here, which does a really good job. Nothing against Lightroom at all. But the Capture One version just kind of has a little bit more true to life color. Take that for what it is. But it has the greens here. You know, she's got a little magenta on her face versus in Lightroom, same kind of thing. Greens are less vibrant, less saturated. But that kind of shows you, you know, between the programs, what you're looking at out of camera specifically. And so what I want to do is, I mean, you can't match the power of Capture One. I mean, looking at, you know, what it does with the image. But one thing I want to do is kind of move on to how the different workflows for these images. And specifically for Capture One, you have the ability to work in catalogs or sessions. I have this set up right now as a catalog. As you can see, all of my images here on the right-hand side kind of set up as a vertical film strip. But I have my whole job set up here. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is kind of show you the options you have real quick of how Capture One works with sessions, and that's going to be you know, if you're setting up specifically, it sets up different subfolders for you to work per client. So if I set up this session as just a July 2015 real quick, and you can kind of see, I'm going to go ahead and let's see, I'm not going to back up now. So now I'm at my importing stage. So I'm just going to import these files into Capture One. Let's get out of that. Pictures, let's go to RAW. And open these files up. As you can see, it's going to import all these images and sort of take its time. And I'm going to let this run. While that's running, I'm going to go ahead and create a new catalog for Lightroom. We'll call it July 2015. We'll put it to the desktop. We'll kind of do this really quick. Let's see here. We'll just call it new. And we'll see if Lightroom can beat Capture One in its import. And just showing you know, program for program, how fast they work on a quantity level. I think this is really important, especially when you're looking at thousands of images on hand. We're going to see if my computer can keep up and allow me to do this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to the import screen. I'm going to kind of do this really quickly. I'm going to go to Finder, create a new Finder window. I'm going to go to Desktop. grab my RAWs really quick and throw those into Lightroom. It's already adding them. I'll go ahead and hit import. As you can see, it's already populating my files quite quickly. And see where Capture One is. It's still kind of rendering. It's running my previews, which is normal. Lightroom does the same thing when it's done, but Lightroom is pretty instant. It'll start building these previews as you see these, as the previews are being built. It's kind of a in-person thing. As those three dots in the upper left-hand corners go away, it renders the preview, it changes it. And that's kind of what it's doing. The same thing in Capture One. Capture One lags a little bit slower. But you know, 30 seconds to a minute, I guess doesn't make a difference on 147 images, but when you're thinking about possibly 4,000 images, I mean, that could be a difference of 15, 20, 30 minutes of time for it just import those files in and how it's rendering them. Those are things to think about when you're looking at workflow and quantity. Lightroom, you know, you can't beat Lightroom on a level of how many images it can process at once. I always suggest, though, on a level of whenever you're, I'm going to go ahead and just quit out of this for now. I'll let this run. I'm going to minimize that. The biggest thing with any program you're using is you want to use a good sorting browse software. As I always suggest, you know, Photo Mechanic, Bridge, On1 has a browse software now. You want to use software that's good for browsing, not for raw processing when you're doing your selection and color correction. But what I'm going to do is open back up Lightroom, open up my catalog, and I want to show you just real quick the integration of the Optics Pro and Lightroom Creative Cloud and what they've done to integrate both of those programs. So I'm going to go ahead and relaunch this option here. And so what I want to do is selecting this file. I'm going to go up to File, Plugins, Extras, and I'm going to go to Transfer to DxO Optics 10. So it's going to take my file and it's going to do its auto corrections as a whole. It's going to process the noise, whatever I have set up as default. But these in here are what they've sort of selected to create. And so as you're noticing here, you have this option for export to Lightroom in the bottom right-hand corner. It's going to take this image, put it back into Lightroom. So I'm still working with the raw file here. You can also go to, let's see here, I think image, export to Lightroom as well. This is your other option. Either way works, but you can choose the quality. I'm going to go ahead and put it to 100%. Let's leave the ICC profile as shot, export to Lightroom. And then you have a few options for what you want to choose for file types. I'm going to process as a DNG to export. So it's going to give me, you have the option to export without processing the file. That means you're going to get the RAW back, but it's not going to have any of the effects. But I'm going to leave it as a DNG so it can still have the quality, same raw processing quality, as close as it can be to the raw file. I'm going to go ahead and hit export. As soon as it's done, it's giving me a little 14 seconds for the export. For any of those people out there worried about that, the time for that it's going to take for that. But I'm going to go ahead and put my my two 5-star images together. It looks like I have a copy in here of sorts. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that. But you can see how it's integrated both of these programs, and it sort of shows the image and it running into DxO Optics Pro. Definitely some fine tuning to do. I sort of left it at the default setting and brought it back in. But as you noticed, let's go here. As you noticed, I still have the same editing ability as I did in with my original RAW file, but you kind of just have the this ability to go in and add your contrast back in and edit the image from there. It created a DNG file, and it makes a DxO_DxO copy DNG versus your RAW file, so it makes a copy of it, but puts it right into Lightroom, and it's great for workflow and using both of those programs. I like that Lightroom works well with other programs and allows you to use them as plugins a lot of times to bring them back in. But that's all I have for you guys today. I mean, you can look at the results, look at the images, and definitely reach out to me if you have any questions about Capture One, Optics Pro, or Lightroom Creative Cloud. I know I talk a lot about Lightroom. It's a great program, but there are other ones out there. It's always good to see what other raw processing programs are out there and what other ones can sort of save you time or maybe give you some of the quality back on the raw files that you're pulling up. Like on this image, I brought it up a stop and a half, just seeing how much quality is still left in that image, even though I underexposed it so much. You saw as I underexposed all of my images, quite under. So if you guys have any questions, definitely reach out to me. But it's pretty obvious that Capture One on a quality level, you can't, versus Lightroom and Optics Pro, it's hands down better on a level of quality. But on a quantity and workflow level, I mean, Lightroom is still sort of the contender and sort of what I'm working with. So thanks for tuning in this week, and so look out for other articles on those programs, and I'll go into depth on those later down the road. So thank you.